where I got didn't quite get there last time. So, Tracy, is that on? You hear me? Okay. Hello, test 1, 2. Yeah, I thought it. All right, Luke 14. Time frame we're trying to tie, I think, get what we had in John and Luke kind of back on the same, dovetailing at the same time. So, Mission dedication is now over. It's probably winter time. Best that the scholars put together the timeline here. Because Luke's just got a lot of parables and stories we've been studying that really don't have anything to tie them to specifically as far as time. So we're looking 3 or 4 months before Jesus dies. He goes probably back across to Perea, best we can put together. So we talked about that. And we wound up then on this slide with Luke 14, 25 and 26. Till we stop, about bearing our cross, be willing to die, and talked about the fact that to them, when they saw crucifixions a lot at the hands of the Romans, bearing a cross and dying was a realistic thing to them that we don't see. Even if somebody's executed these days, it's all behind closed scenes and public. Don't get to see like public hangings of the old West and things like that. But to them, it was real. I mean, the crucifixion, bearing your cross, carrying your cross, being willing to die for Christ was a realistic symbol type thing to them. So he says, bear your cross, come after me, continuous action, the verb is, and follow after me in a continuing type fashion. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. So that's kind of the things that we talked about with this slide just a little bit. And then I brought up this thing from Romans 8, and I'm going to mention it again. I'm not going to dive into it as much as we did Wednesday night. But Romans 8, verses 16 through 18. That says, if we're children of God, that's the whole who it's addressed to, if we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. Glorified together with him because we have suffered with him. We have borne our cross, been willing to be crucified, suffering with him. We can be glorified with him. Then Paul says, for I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. And so that's kind of the points we wound up with on Wednesday night. And it's some pretty rich, deep things. If you were here Wednesday night and heard Will's comments, he used 1 John chapter 3. Behold, what manner of the love the Father has bestowed on us that we should be called children of God. Here's our phrase again. That the world does not know us because it did not know him. Beloved, we are now children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we see him as he is. That's the glorification part was talking about there. The sufferings in a few verses before that. So that ties in with it. 1 Peter chapter 4, first verse also makes that point. So then from there, when he talks about bearing your cross and being his disciple, he goes into this cost of discipleship. He talks about it a little bit. He uses 2 things to illustrate it with. First is that person's going to build a house and they count the cost, enough money to finish it. The other was a man going to war with 10,000 against somebody's got 20,000. And if that's your situation, you better count your costs and see what it's going to work out and go make some peace terms before you get there. So the question comes down then, what is the cost of discipleship? What does it cost us to be a disciple? And I want to read a rather lengthy piece here this morning that says a lot about that. I'll try to do it where you can understand. Because it's talking about sitting down and counting the cost with both these little parables here are talking about. To sit down implies thorough consideration and calculation in order to act wisely. To count the cost is to calculate it, your American Standard, or to estimate it, the International Version, the total expenditure necessary to complete the task. Obviously, reason dictates that one determines whether he have sufficient to finish it before he even begins. And that ties right back to these 2 examples here. It says, building one's life for Christ may cost friends and family. It will cost laying aside sinful pleasures, relationships, and activities. It can cost one's profession or even his life. Am I willing to pay the ultimate price of martyrdom? We don't think about that, do we? If I cannot accept martyrdom spirit, I cannot be a disciple. Peter compared turning to false teachers and away from Christ, saying, for if they, after they have escaped the pollution of the world through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter ends worse for them than the beginning. For it had been better not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn to the holy commandments and deliver them. But having them, according to the true proverb, a dog turned to his own vomit, a sow washed to wallowing in the mire. John appealed, look to yourselves that we do not lose those things we worked for, but that we may receive a full reward. The builder is worse off having started and not being able to finish than he was before doing anything, because men see the unfinished work and know he did not plan well. One should carefully consider his actions, lest happily the end result is a failure and a ridicule. So he's talking about counting the cost of discipleship. What does it cost? And am I able to complete the building? Am I able to build the tower? Am I able to go to war and win the battle with that? So what's the cost of discipleship? Here's the cost. It's forsaking all. Forsaking everything, including family. To the extent we talked about hate, but put service to Christ above everything else. Everything else. And in this time we live in, that's hard to do. The kid's got a ball game, or this has got that, or I've got to work later. Over and over and over. They just, one excuse after the other comes up and gets in the way. And that's just minor compared to really suffering and facing martyrdom like some of those early Christians did, and people through the ages. So where are we with that? Another comment. Materialism, which this thing called wrapped up in, is the bane of our affluent society and perhaps the greatest present danger to the church. If a Christian is affected and must constantly deal with the temptations it presents, the present tense of the verb is used indicating one must continually forsake all else to follow Jesus. He must take precedence in our lives. That requires total trust and devotion. God will provide if we seek first his kingdom, his righteousness, Matthew 6. Therefore, we should come to him unencumbered so he can supply all of our needs. After